Our next case is out of North Carolina, where a mother of two who is still missing, but she is presumed dead. There are now two people who have been charged with her murder. 23-year-old Monica Moynan, who may have been pregnant at the time of her murder, was reported missing in July of 2019. Police believe that she may have been pregnant, and that may be one of the reasons that she may have been killed. So, Brian Sluss is the father of her two children and her ex-boyfriend. He has been charged with her murder, and he is believed to be the last person to have seen her alive. Jarlyn Sluss is Brian's ex-wife, ex-wife of the ex. I know it gets very confusing here. She's been charged with obstruction of justice and an accessory after the fact because she somehow was a part, at least in the back end of this cover-up. So let's get into some of the facts here because I know it's really confusing. We have a mom of two who's missing, believed murdered. The two people who are charged with murdering her are her ex-boyfriend, baby daddy, and his ex-wife. Already it's like Peyton Place here. Police say that for months after she disappeared, her ex-boyfriend, Brian, texted friends and her family using her phone. So it made it appear that she was alive, right? She's responding to people, she's posting on social media. So for a while there, it appears that Monica is alive. But it was Monica's mother who found it very strange because she had not spoken with her daughter, and that was unusual. So it was Monica's mother who called the police and said, look, you need to do a welfare check because this is really bizarre. I'm sure something is wrong. And that's when the case in earnest starts unfolding. Police say that Monica was finally reported back in July of 2019, but they believe that really she was missing since April. So Eric, what do you make of this? How does the cell phone fit into things, and what was going on here with the ex-Brian?
Yeah, this is actually a pretty fascinating case. And, anytime we're talking about a murder prosecution, a murder investigation without the body, there are incredibly high thresholds to arrive at investigatively and also in prosecution. One of the things you think about going to court is if you're going to do a murder prosecution, the jury is going to expect that there's a body and there's some forensic examination of that body that indicates it was a homicide. So to start out with, the FBI actually has a whole behavioral science unit that's based on putting together cases and prosecuting cases without a body. And what they refer to is the victim's footprint. Excuse me. And what this case offers us, right, is you can start to see some of the maybe investigative hesitance because there's still part of a footprint there. The footprint relating to the impression that the victim, the missing person, is leaving in the world. There's two parts of that. There's the physical one. That's the mother saying, I'm not hearing from her, and I always hear from her. The other is the electronic footprint. And the electronic footprint, we kind of had that because theoretically, the way the case looks like it's being put together, it was actually the suspect, her ex and his ex-wife that were using her cell phone to put out social media, to generate that electronic footprint. So as we get deeper into the case, I think we start to see how other information starts to come together that leads us to get beyond those thresholds, to open the investigation, to make it an arrest, and then finally, to arrive at prosecution.
And wasn't Brian using Monica's car? Didn't he have her car?
He had her car, but he had what may have at first glance been a reasonable reason for having the car, in that he said his car was broken down and she had given her car to him so he could drive the kids around. And so again, at the boots on the ground responding out to this, that's not unreasonable. It's a piece of information that I have, but it's not unreasonable, and starts to think, what were Monica's resources to disappear from the world without her car? and you would start to put that to could she afford to buy a plane ticket or a bus ticket? Because then we would go to those places like the bus station or Annie, we would check every airline. We can do that relatively easily to see if she shows up on a manifest someplace.
They found some interesting things, the police. So there were search warrants that were finally issued in October, and that they reveal that investigators found a positive pregnancy test in Monica's home. That's why they believe that she was pregnant. That's why they believe that that could have had something to do with it, because it seems like the most recent incident or event.
Yeah, as you start to put together the timeline, absolutely. When was the last time anyone other than the suspect had any interaction with her? And one of those things, we can tell that she was alive at this moment because there's this test, and the test was positive. How that then later generates into potential motive, you can start to put those pieces together.
Police also say that Brian kept changing his story about where Monica was, since remember, he was the last person to see her alive and they have children together. He told police that she was addicted to cocaine and had run away. Then he told police that she was in a drug treatment center. Of course, he couldn't tell them which one, and nonetheless, they didn't find her at any drug treatment center. So here's the background, the deep dive. At the time of Monica's disappearance, she had a protective order against Brian.
Yeah. Again, it's that cycle of abuse. The first and foremost, you get out to a missing person case, and you would what's the background of that person, and literally, in local law enforcement at your fingertips, you would be able to find out that the person that's missing has been the victim of domestic violence. Now we're focusing in on, let's go back and find that person that was allegedly involved in the domestic violence. It's one leads directly to the other.
Well, here's the problem with part of his story about the car. If he says, oh, she lent me the car because I needed it, well, excuse me, she's got a restraining order against you. Why in the world would she ever help you with a car?
You're exactly right. And then, but as you can see it unfold, as the officers are responding out, they say, yeah, she's got a restraining order, but they also have kids. So she might be looking at it. Now, not saying that this is what happened, obviously, but at least at that first glance, it's unusual, but it's not like suspect by itself, because you can rationalize how the mother of children might give her ex, the car, even though he's a domestic abuser, so their kids can be more comfortable getting around town.
So let's talk about Brian's ex-wife, Jarlyn, who is also charged as an accessory here. She told police that her ex-husband called her the day that Monica is believed to have been killed, the last time she was seen alive. She claimed that he was in an emotional state, that he talked about what his kids should receive as if he's discussing his estate after he's gone, as if something is going to happen to him. Police say then Brian went to Jarlyn's house several times, and they find this interesting. Brian apparently lied to police, saying that, when they said, where were you? Brian apparently told police that he was on his way to his parents' house when he was actually at Jarlyn's house, the ex-wife, because they tracked his GPS, and clearly he was not in a different state or in a different location. He was at the ex's. Jarlyn, the ex-wife, told police that he asked her to call Monica's apartment manager and pretend to be Monica. Now, why would you need to do that unless something terrible has happened to that person? It's almost, and probably the apartment manager would not really recognize Monica's voice, so Jarlyn probably, could have pulled it off pretending to be her, but of course she could not fool Monica's family or mother, no way. And then there were a lot of phone calls that went back and forth between Brian and his ex, Jarlyn. So when that search warrant was finally executed at Jarlyn's house in August of 2019, she told police that she had a copy of a driver's license belonging to Monica and some of her personal photos. Why would the ex-wife, unless she's a stalker, have these things?
Right. And you can see how this plays out, right? As the officers are now focusing in on what was taking place. And remember, I talked earlier about that electronic footprint of the victim. there's also an electronic footprint of potential suspects. And using GPS, capabilities, they were able, they talk to him and they get, they ask him a question, and then they find out that his answer is a lie. And so why would you lie to me about that? Because he's not on his way to his parents. He's at his ex-wife's house, which leads again to get to that threshold that now I believe a crime really has been committed here. And they have to convince a judge, right? I need to go into the ex-wife's house because I believe that there might be evidence of a crime there. That's not an easy threshold to get to, but with all the pieces coming together, a judge did sign a search warrant. And what do they find in the ex-wife's house? Information that would suggest that she might have been complicit in a crime. And number one, that a crime committed, and she could be complicit in it. So as you start to look at, as they're building a case, everywhere they're going, the law enforcement agency and everything they're doing is within the boundaries of reasonableness and supporting this theory that first the ex-boyfriend and now his ex-wife are involved in a murder. But we're still at that point where we don't have a body. This is not an easy case by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and the restraining order apparently says that Monica thought she was going to die because Brian had choked her. And even though she had this restraining order, she still permitted the father to visit the children. And it's really unclear what was the nature of the relationship between Monica and Brian, because again, there's this pregnancy test. So is she pregnant with his baby? Are they kind of getting back together, or what's going on here?
When there's a couple of different ways, and this again, we're left on our side of this with some speculation, and we don't have all the information that the police department does, but we can actually come to a couple of different potential conclusions. One was, it was obviously they just didn't like each other at all, but there was some type of custodial agreement that said that he got to visit the children. Now, it could be that he was still in love with her, and she was trying to get away from him, and that's because of the domestic violence. And maybe she told him, "I'm pregnant," and he knew it wasn't his baby. Maybe that's one of the motivations for what could have been violence. It could be that he doesn't want anything to do with her, and she was still madly in love with him, and she says, "I'm pregnant with your baby," and that could be that tipping point. The fact that the pregnancy test is something that based on what we're reading, the police department used probably in obtaining additional search warrants. I would, knowing what I know and having been involved in similar investigations, there's some other information that they believe that pregnancy test was a sparking moment, that one way or another, like, I'm so mad at you because you're having somebody else's baby, or you're really messing up my whole plan because you're having my baby.
Right. And we don't know yet because obviously Monica hasn't been found. Her body's not been found. So obviously, once she is, an autopsy might be able to explain the level of pregnancy and perhaps some DNA information that would tell us who the father was.
Right. I'm not 100% sure that information is not available off the pregnancy test, depending on what type of pregnancy test it was. But with the technology that is available, they may be able to determine just even from that test, how those tests are, how you take that test, depending on what type it is. It's possible that there could be DNA evidence that links Brian directly to the pregnancy.
Or someone else.
Right.
So we've got to talk about the kids here because Brian and Monica had 2 children, and he's behind bars. She's missing and presumed dead. So apparently once Monica was declared officially missing, Monica's mother, the children's grandparents, applied to have custody of the kids. And that's where they are now with Monica's mother. So they are safe. And that's, because you have to think about them. They're the ultimate victims here as well, because their mother is gone, presumed murder, and their father is charged with killing their mother.
Yeah, I've been personally involved in, as I was reading this case, I was kind of going back through my caseload, and I've been personally involved in 3 of these types of cases where the father killed the mother and there were children involved. And in one of those cases, having to actually tell the children that the mother was dead and the father's in custody. I get teary thinking about that now, and I can't imagine what that does, to the children listening to that, someone that they don't know at all, that's giving them this information, and how that, impacts the rest of their life. I just, as many victims as we run into, with violence and such, perhaps, the most vulnerable of all that is when there's children involved.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how children recover from that. And the only antidote to evil and pain and suffering is love and compassion. And hopefully that they are surrounded with a lot of support, a lot of therapy, and professionals assisting them to get through this. And I am also a big believer that you need to tell the kids when it's appropriate at the right time, the truth, because that will help them process what really happened. How can you shield them at this point?
Yeah, and there are experts, at a level of, a pay grade that goes well beyond mine about when and where to share, what and how, at various levels. And I'm sure there's variables about the child's ability to absorb and understand that information.
So here's where the two people charged stand. On May 5th, Brian was arrested in Virginia at his parents' house. He's been charged with murder, and he has waived his right to extradition. He's being held without bond. His ex-wife, Jarlyn, was arrested on May 12th. She was charged with accessory after the fact. She was arrested at her home, and she is being held on $750,000 bail. Both have pleaded innocent, and Monica is still missing.
Yeah, that's going to be the key here is, as we know, the way the court system is designed, right, is both of these folks are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So again, we get to that threshold about the prosecutors. Now, the investigators, they had to reach certain thresholds to gather enough information to be able to put a case in front of the prosecutors. Now, the prosecutors have filed charges and made arrests. And now they've got to get over the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt, convincing 12, a jury of their peers, that they committed this crime without a body. And that still is incredibly difficult. So, put yourself in the position, I'm a juror and I'm listening to this information. Do I believe that the person is dead? Have they got there? And then if I do believe the person is dead, has the prosecutor given me enough information to believe that these two people are responsible either directly or after the fact in that murder? And it'll be a fascinating case to see how it plays out. The motivation is going to be a very big thing. I think, although we haven't seen all of it, the depth of that pregnancy test, I think that's going to end up being a key issue in the establishing a motive. The domestic violence, the previous domestic violence, certainly goes a long way with a jury as a pattern of behavior. And I think one of the things about a case without a body is there's no way for a juror to sit in a jury box like that without thinking, what if I was to disappear tomorrow? What is my footprint? And, what would be, would people come looking for me? And would they notice that? And, we all kind of think, boy, if I did all of a sudden just fell off the face of the earth, would the police and others be advocating for me, really looking for me? And if something bad happened, would they really be hunting down the person that did it? It's not out of the realm of possibility that the juror would be thinking, what if this happened to me? And then they can right away put themselves in Monica's shoes and say, did this happen to Monica?